Good morning, this is Dennis Fuchs with the Stearns County Soil and Water Conservation District. Today I'd like to talk to you about the latest nitrogen fertilizer rule that the Minnesota Department of Ag is working on. They're developing the nitrogen fertilizer rule and is seeking public comment. This past week they had public comment open at the St. Cloud Library, and lots of folks were at that meeting, approximately 50 folks, ranging from farmers to concerned citizens, on how to manage nitrogen fertilizer. The purpose of the rule is to minimize potential sources of nitrate pollution in the state's groundwater and protect our drinking water. So what they're looking at is the areas in Minnesota that are sensitive to nitrate pollution, which are coarse textured soils, shallow aquifers. And we do have several areas like that in Stearns County. And part of that was a targeted township nitrate sampling in private wells. The Minnesota Department of Ag determines current nitrate nitrogen concentrations in private wells on a township scale through the Township Testing Program. The Minnesota Department of Ag has identified townships throughout the state that are vulnerable to groundwater contamination and have significant row crop production. The Minnesota Department of Ag plans to offer nitrate testing to more than 70,000 private well owners in over 300 townships by 2019. Each selected township is offered testing in two steps: the initial sampling and the follow-up sampling. In the initial sampling, all township homeowners using a private well are sent a nitrate test kit. If the nitrate is detected in their initial sample, the homeowner is offered a follow-up nitrate test, pesticide test, and a well site visit from trained MDA staff who visit with willing homeowners to resample the well and then conduct a site assessment of the well area. The assessment helps to identify possible non-fertilizer sources of nitrate and to see the condition of the well. A well with construction problems may be more susceptible to contamination and would be removed from the sample set. The Stearns County Soil Water Conservation District worked with the Minnesota Department of Ag to select the townships that would have the greatest possibility of nitrate contamination. And the following townships were selected in Stearns County: Brockway, Crow Lake, Crow River, Fairhaven, Grove, LaSalle, Linden, Main Prairie, Melrose, Millwood, Munson, North Fork, Oak, and Wakefield. The initial sampling in Stearns County started in 2014, and a follow-up sampling ended in 2015. And we had one well, or one township, that exceeded greater than 10% of the wells in there, greater than the drinking standard of 10 parts per million. But I'm going to just go through and township by township and tell you the percent of wells that were over 10 parts per million. That's the drinking standard. And we're concerned about nitrate because it is one of the most contaminants in Minnesota's groundwater. The majority of Minnesota households have access to safe drinking water supplies. However, in areas sensitive to groundwater contamination, some public and private wells may have high nitrate levels. Too much nitrate in drinking water can pose a serious health concern for humans. So we're looking at a township by township breakdown of the ones that were selected in Stearns County. I'll tell you now which ones and how many percent of the wells were over the 10 part per million. Brockway was at 9.9% of the wells over 10 part per million. Crow Lake, 5.9%. Crow River, 6.8%. Grove was at 11.4%. And keep that in mind now, that was over 10% of the wells exceeding the drinking health standard in Grove. And I'll follow up a little bit more with that in a second. LaSalle was at 6.4%. Linden was at 1.8%. Main Prairie, 3.6%. Melrose, 3.3%. Millwood, 1.2%. Munson was at 4.6%. North Fork, 0.0%. Oak, 0.0%. Wells exceeding the drinking standard, that's awesome. Wakefield was at 8.2% of the wells exceeding the drinking standard of 10 part per million. So if you look at all of those combined, 6.9% of the wells sampled in those sensitive areas exceeded the drinking standard of 10 part per million. Now, the communities, as part of the nitrogen fertilizer rule, Grove will be designated as a mitigation level 2, which means stronger action will be needed to prevent further nitrate pollution and regulation. And the Minnesota Department of Ag will be forming a local advisory team and will be seeking input from the community. The advisory team will review nitrogen fertilizer BMPs for the area and advise the Minnesota Department of Ag of suitable practices. The local advisory team will offer leadership and support the local BMP and alternative practices. Alternative practices would be like cover crops. That's just one example of an alternative practice. The Minnesota Department of Ag will then post nitrogen fertilizer BMPs for the area, and folks will continue to use and promote nitrogen fertilizer BMPs and alternative practices. After 3 growing seasons, farmers participate in a nitrogen fertilizer BMP survey. If the survey indicates that more than 80% of the cropland in the mitigation area is pursuing best management practices, then no further regulation is likely. If BMPs and alternative practices are not used on 80% or less than 80% of the cropland in the mitigation area, then further regulation is likely. And then the Minnesota Department of Ag will reevaluate the area in 3 years. So this is a new process that the Department of Ag is trying to move forward with, and Stearns County has been participating with the Minnesota Department of Ag to address any of the potential resource concerns associated with nitrate pollution in our groundwater. And we're looking forward to working with farmers and solving our natural resource concerns, and especially nitrate. And one of the quickest ways to address that is to use nitrogen fertilizer best management practices, which we'll talk about at a future show. Until the next time, please attend a Stearns County League baseball game. And this has been Dennis Fuchs with the Stearns County Soil and Water Conservation District Update.